Since the last 2 years, we have seen Rome and North America not just hold hands, go to bed together. When the government in North America needs advice, they run to the Vatican and they get advice there. And we are seeing this close relationship. But a year or two ago, things were moving in quite a different direction. Things were moving in North America toward a final collapse, a cancellation of the elections, a taking over by North America, becoming a police state. Europe was uniting under one government. Only South America was heading the opposite direction. And we were watching and wonder, Lord, what are you doing? Because it's becoming a one-world government under the heading of under Rome. And we've prayed, Lord, buy us more time. Please, we need more time. And God's people began to pray around the world, Lord, buy us more time. And all of a sudden, things began, the plan A began to break apart. We noticed as South America became more and more left, bringing a little bit of equilibrium, balance, back into world politics. Extreme right in North America, extreme left in South America. And then we noticed that, did you remember the vote they had in Europe? Do you remember the name of the only country that voted against it? You remember the name of that country? Ireland. Little tiny Ireland. Of all the countries, they had a referendum. They took it to the people. They figured they couldn't lose, and the people voted against it. And Ireland voted against it, and it was the only country that broke 2 years of planning and preparation. Suddenly, the whole plans went awry. And they were so frustrated and angry. They said, let's do it anyway. We can't. It has to be unanimous. So now they're starting back again, another 2-year process to try to bring everybody together. This time, they won't make the mistake of letting the people decide. This time, the signatures will be gathered without the people's permission, because it's dangerous to let the people choose. Do you understand what I'm saying, right? When the people choose, you have democracy. But if you want a one-world government, you can't allow the people to have the power. So this put everything back. And because Europe broke apart in the plan to unite Europe, because North America was also swinging, the Supreme Court has 5 Catholic judges out of 7 on the U.S. Supreme Court. Every time they vote, Rome wins. But suddenly, the Justice Kennedy, one of the 5 Catholic judges, began to see things differently. He began to vote with the opposition. And all of a sudden, everything is going in a different direction in the U.S. Supreme Court than it was planned to go in. For example, supporting the torture and execution of prisoners with no rights, Rome was foremost in supporting the U.S. president in that direction. They always have. Rome has always been supportive of taking away people's rights. And with the 5 Catholic judges were ordered to vote in support of not allowing anybody to have civil trials, maintain it into military court, and keep it out of sight. But Justice Kennedy decided he's not going to do that. Justice Kennedy decided to vote with the opposition, and suddenly you had, I'm sorry, I said 7, it's 9. 4, it was 5 against 4. And suddenly with Justice Kennedy switching, now you had 5 against 4. 4 Catholic judges voted to suppress the rights of prisoners to have a civilian trial. And Justice Kennedy switched sides, and the U.S. Supreme Court voted to give prisoners in Guantanamo Bay that had been tortured without any human rights the right to a public civilian trial. You know what this means? That means every single person will now know the atrocities that happened in Guantanamo Bay under this government. That means that justice can prevail again. If you keep it secret and don't tell anybody, you can do anything you want and don't report, you're not responsible to anybody. But the moment it goes to a public civilian trial, it means you have access to justice once again. And so, one after the other, the Supreme Court has been voting in favor of human rights once again. And the trend is now swinging, the pendulum is now swinging. And all of a sudden, we find ourselves in a little bubble of opportunity. God's people can work once again The great controversy tells us that in the Middle Ages, during the Reformation, God wanted the Reformation to spread throughout Europe. So the Turks started a war, and Rome spent so much time focusing on the Turkish war that they had no time to deal with Martin Luther. They had no time to deal with Melanchthon. And the Reformation spread throughout Europe. By the time that Rome could once again turn its attention back to the Reformation, it had already spread everywhere. Now, I want you to know that we're living in exactly the same time right now. During the last several years, North America has been gathering suspect lists, watch lists, organizations that they intend to keep down. Anybody that was not going the same direction they were. The Seventh-day Adventist Church was invited to the White House. And one of the questions that was asked, will you work with us? The only problem is, what does that mean, will you work with us? Does that mean that if any president invites you, you should be the first to say, Mr. President, what can we do to help? But the question asked, what do you mean, work with us? The problem is, they're trying to identify any organization, they have been trying to identify any organization that will be going the opposite direction of the direction they wanted to go. You see, so we live in very difficult times. So if even the Seventh-day Adventist Church was invited to come there, Elder Paulson was invited, and they discussed several issues. But the question asked is, which direction are you going, Mr. President? Before I can tell you if I can go your direction, right? Are you going toward human rights or away from human rights? If it's away from human rights, we're not with you. If it's toward human rights, we're with you. Many issues were discussed, but they have been putting out feelers. Which organizations are going our direction? And so during this time, I'm going to tell you about the Lazarus experience. Have you heard about the Lazarus experience? A little bit. I'm going to tell you where we are now. In 2005, we were living in Europe. We had come right to the end of 2005. We had just signed a contract, intention to buy, not a contract to buy, but an intention to buy, an interest in buying, an $18.5 million network in Brazil. I got a call from a brother who came to me and he said, could I come meet with you? And he said, how much do you owe in Brazil? Well, I said, we have an intention to buy, an opportunity to buy this network. How much? 18.5 million. He said, no problem, I'll pay for it. What else do you need? I said, well, in Chile we have an opportunity to buy a national network for $3 million. He said, no problem, I'll pay for it. What else do you need? I said, excuse me, where in the world did you come from? He said, well, God has given me an opportunity. I have a rather big company. And he said, I am financing my business, and I have been approved. I have been issued an approval for 100 million euros. And half of that I'm dedicating to God's work. He said, and so I'm willing to put up to that half of it into God's work to help it grow. So he said, I will give you half of it. Well, I went home and told my wife, and she said, well, let's pray first to make sure this is God's will. Just because somebody wants to do it doesn't mean it's God's will. So she was praying. Now, my wife is a listener, and I'm a talker. So I spend most of my time praying. When I pray, I unload on God. I tell her, I remind him about all the things that we have and all the issues I'm carrying, and I offload them to God. I take them off my shoulders and dump them on God's shoulders. That's how I can survive every day. So I spend a lot of time talking to God in prayer. My wife, on the other hand, when I'm doing that, she's over there going, and so then when I get done praying, I say, what did God tell you today? And she shares with me what she had just read. And it's very inspirational because she's a listener. She's listening to God while I'm talking to God. God is talking already. and so she shared with me. She said, I've been reading this morning, and I just read this morning, God said, I will give you the wealth of the heathen as an inheritance. And she said, I believe that God is giving the wealth of the nations to his people. And I believe this gift is going to be of God. So we accepted that we accepted and told them, we will accept your gift.